Howdy. I just picked up a new camera. Here's my new toy without the lens yet. So this is a Rebel SL3 Canon. And this is my main camera, much bigger. This is 6D Mark II. And I wanted to do a comparison, you know, do like maybe photos and video on these two cameras, but then I realized that, wait a second. Not everybody is into photography because most people shoot with cell phones nowadays. And I thought instead of comparing the two cameras, I would just talk about the differences and similarities between a cell phone and a camera like this, to see why would somebody want to be spending extra money on a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, but just basically a dedicated camera. And I came up with a extensive list that has six positions. Took me a while, but I do a lot of video for YouTube, just like this one, and now I'm recording with a GoPro, which is my favorite tiny camera, exactly like this. I have two of these. You see, I have all these mounts. And that's another mount I often use when I'm driving for this GoPro. But when I want a better quality, or when I'm shooting like wildlife, I'm doing wildlife photography, I'm using the big camera, because of course this one you cannot use with an external lens. But speaking about cell phone versus let's call them DSLR, right? Even though by that I mean a mirrorless as well. But I'm not a fan of mirrorless. I just don't like that viewfinder. I like the optical viewfinder much better. And I used Nikon before because I believe their sensors were better, because I think they use Sony sensors, right? But when comparing them, I found that image quality, like photography wise, on a Nikon was better than on a Canon. But now Canon is catching up. They just released, they just leaked news of their new crop sensor camera 90D, which is supposed to be like 32 megapixels, and it's a crop sensor camera. So I believe Canon is catching up. But the thing is that all these camera manufacturers are reporting pretty bad sale results, and that's what gave me an idea for this video. So like, why fewer and fewer people are using dedicated cameras, and they just, you know, whenever you see a YouTube video about like a street performer, I was just noticing like somebody is dancing in the street, and maybe one person would be using like a DSLR like this to record a video, but most people would be just, you'll see them like this, you know, when they're recording. Like, nobody's using cameras. But there's still instances, situations where a dedicated camera would be beneficial. And so here's my list, just 6 positions. So first of all, if you're using if you're shooting a video quite often, like for YouTube for example, right? A big part of video is sound. And it took me a while to come to this level where I started using external microphones, but on most typical cell phones, it's hard or impossible to connect an external microphone. Whereas most cameras, with the exception of some really cheap ones, they come with a port. Like, I'll show you on this one. See on this, I got this port in here, right? So I can hook up a cheap Rode mic like this, and I like this one because this one has no batteries. It just uses power from the camera, you know, and I don't even bother with manual levels. I just leave everything on automatic. But this setup, when I'm recording myself, the sound is much better. like here I'm recording inside my big semi truck, but if I were to step outside and try to record with the GoPro, the sound would not be very good because of the wind, you know. So that's advantage number one of having a dedicated DSLR, is the ability to use external microphones. Okay. Advantage number two is the reach. Even nowadays you can buy these little additions to your cell phone where you have like, even like my LG G6 has 2 cameras in the back, right? And I can switch angles, but they're, you know, just 2 fixed focal lengths, so I don't have a zoom, right? And I cannot shoot wildlife with this phone because you need a big lens. And so with the DSLR you can change lenses, right? So you can go from, I don't know, 14 millimeters to 1000 millimeters or whatever your budget is, and that would allow you much more reach, like for wildlife, you know, for street photography, stuff like that. And it's very easy to, you know, separate them, right? And you can put lens from one camera to another, especially if it's one system like this Canon. So I can take this lens and put it on this camera. Actually, that's what I'm planning to do, because this is the only lens I have now with me, and this is 24-105, so that's a zoom. And on this camera it's going to be 35 to 160 because it's a crop sensor camera. And so the reach, you don't get that with a cell phone, right? Let's say you want to be a paparazzi, you know, and you want to take pictures of famous people. It's very hard to do that with a cell phone unless, you know, you sneak in like real close and you say, hey, how about a selfie, you know? But probably you will get more money for your picture of a famous person if you're not in the picture, you know. I'm not saying that you're not pretty or handsome, but it's just the nature of the beast. They want the pictures of the famous people not of the photographer. So because of that, a cell phone would not work. So advantage number one, sound. Advantage number two, reach and the ability to use zoom lenses. Advantage number three, but this one gets blurry, is the image quality. Like especially iPhones, right? Everybody knows that the phones get better and better, even though they use tiny sensors, but the processing power, you know, the computer power behind that sensor, it's like unbelievable. It's like our cell phones are like mini computers, and so they can make a very good use of its tiny sensor. And I was walking somewhere in the airport, I think it was somewhere here, like I was flying somewhere, and I saw a bunch of pictures, like huge prints on the wall, and they were saying they were all made from iPhone, you know. But still, a camera like this has a full frame sensor, which is 35 millimeter, and it's much bigger than a sensor inside a cell phone. So especially if you use a quality lens, like an expensive lens, like I have a 35 millimeter f2, that would definitely be a better quality than from a cell phone. And the other part, the other side of that coin, image quality, is also actually no, that's another, sorry, another clause. So image quality, in theory, is supposed to be better with DSLRs, but again, that gets blurry, the difference more and more with every day, right? But one thing that you cannot achieve still, I'm pretty sure, because of the sensor size, is low light performance. Like if you try to take a picture with your cell phone, especially if you use a selfie mode in a dark room, you know, let's say at home and you have only one light, you will see a bunch of grain. Like the picture will be, you know, hard to get it sharp, and it'll be just grain, you know, lots of grain, lots of noise, digital noise. Whereas these cameras especially a full frame camera, you'll get a much cleaner image. And that's why, for example, wedding photographers that often have to shoot pictures in, you know, in dark rooms with people dancing, right? Or there's like a ceremony inside a church. They use full frame cameras. They don't use cell phones, right? Low light performance. And I was thinking what else to add here, and I came up with production value. Production value. When you're working for hire, when somebody hired you to take pictures, you know, hey, we'll give you $100. Can you just shoot some photos of our birthday party, you know, or maybe be like a second shooter at a wedding, or probably if you're new and they don't trust you with weddings, maybe they'll trust you. Usually it's easier to break in. It's burials, you know, funerals are usually easier to break into, because the main event, the main person at the funeral, usually they don't care about the image quality. But whether it's a funeral or a wedding, if people are paying you money, they will think twice about paying you money if you just show up with a cell phone. So they want to see the value, right? The value of the service. And even though the image quality can be similar, especially in bright daylight, but people will not look at you as a serious photographer or videographer if you're just using a cell phone. So these babies add a lot of production value, right? Okay, and last but not least, something I came up with is weather sealing. Weather sealing. So again, phones get better and better, but I'm pretty sure that a camera that's advertised as a weather sealed camera will be better protected against elements as a cell compared to the cell phone, you know. Like especially these expensive cameras that professionals use, you know, like Canon 1DX, stuff like that. They're very heavy, but they build what they call like a tank. So even if you drop it, it might still work. It might still work after that. Well, I dropped my phone a few times, but lucky for me, I have this super strong, you know, protective case. But my previous one, I dropped on some gravel, and the screen cracked, you know. So anyway, so cameras are stronger, they're more durable, and they're better protected against the elements. So those 6 points I'd like to, that I thought would be helpful to people, you know, thinking about the differences between a cell phone and a camera. So sound for video, reach and zoom lenses, image quality, low light performance, production value, and weather sealing. And a couple of things I wanted to mention about this one, because this looks like a very funny camera, and you will notice that the top is very different. Like this is kind of like a medium, you know, price value camera, so it has, you see, it has basically more controls. Where this is kind of like what Nikon, I had a camera, Nikon D5500, D5300, so it's the same kind of like style. But what's cool about this one, that this camera, I got this specifically for video, because this, like for selfies, you know, for selfies for YouTube, because this camera, especially with this lens, the camera is about 700 grams and the lenses are another 200-300, so it's like a kilo over 2 pounds, you know, when you're holding it on a stick like this. And so I wanted to get a lighter camera, and this one, this SL3 that just came out in April, now it's 2019, it only weighs just over a pound, like 420 grams with a card and battery. But of course it doesn't have as many functions as that one, it doesn't have as many focus points, but it still has this. It has the touch screen, which is also a flip screen, which that's my #1 number one requirement for selfie YouTube, videos when you're shooting yourself. And it has the external microphone connector, right? And it has this, so I can hook up the microphone again, just like I did on 6D Mark II. I can hook it up here. See? Can hook it up like this. Put a tripod in here, and we're good to go. And so this camera, it's much cheaper than that one. And so I would say that, these modern crop sensor cameras from Canon and Nikon, I really like them. And this one has a touch focus, like basically I can point at something. Let's say if I'm recording, I can just touch that person's face and it'll start tracking, or let's say I can touch any point on the screen and the camera will automatically focus because it has this dual pixel AF. One of the major reasons I switched to Canon from Nikon is because of dual pixel AF. Anyway, so that was some thoughts on DSLRs versus cell phones. And the next video I'm gonna do a comparison. We're gonna look at the quality, because some people say, like, do you need a full frame camera? And so now I have these two cameras and I'm in perfect position to compare, and I can use the same lens 24-105 and just compare. Well, now it's too late, the sky is dark, the sun is gone, but when the weather is nice, and I still have to buy an SD card because I just got this today, came in the mail from B&H Photo. But I'm gonna do a comparison of these two cameras, and we're gonna look at the image quality, video and pictures. And this one can actually shoot 4K. I don't know how bad the crop is, because some of these cameras, when you choose 4K, they give you, like, I don't know, 1.6 or 1.7 additional crop. And that would be another interesting, I think, discussion, whether you need a full frame or not, and what the advantages and disadvantages are of these two kind of like system, crop sensor and full frame. So Sergei DRATCHEV is out. Thanks for watching.